Hey everyone, just a quick word before we dive into this week's episode. The main topic of discussion this week is mental well-being with a focus on suicide. If this is a topic that is particularly challenging for you, or you think that you might be triggered by a frank discussion about suicide, then this may not be the episode for you, and we encourage you to look after yourself as you engage with this podcast. There are a number of mental health resources available down below in the show notes, including Lifeline. You can contact Lifeline by calling 13 11 14. We love you, we appreciate all of you, and we hope that this episode brings you hope and life.
This week on Filthy Hope.
I was in a loving family. I had friends, people who cared for me, and I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And I put myself through hell.
I
Jesus
say-
made the poor guy who was blind.
Yeah.
Spit and mud in his face.
Spitting mud in your face, and then go and wash it off. Like if you couldn't see beforehand, now you can't see because you've got spitting mud on your eyes. How the hell am I going to find the pool of Siloam? I'm blind.
That's right.
And there is no one here to help me.
Yeah.
And but he did. He found his way through, and that's for me the encouraging thing. That
That's hope on the
sometimes we
brink.
need to participate in our own healing.
This podcast is a Uniting Heart and Soul production and was recorded on land that was stolen nearly 250 years ago. On this particular episode, we recorded on the land occupied by the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation. We pay our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and we acknowledge that sovereignty over these lands was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. At Filthy Hope, we humbly contribute to the ancient and ongoing traditions of storytelling when we share stories on this podcast.
Jesus is Lord.
Hello and welcome back to Filthy Hope, the podcast that spends time in the grey spaces where Jesus, life and culture intersect. If it's your first time, welcome. Super glad you could join us. My name's Jonty, and as always, I'm joined by Rev Ness.
Hi, Jonty.
And I've been instructed to introduce Gator as well.
Gator, you got to
Yeah,
say it
sorry,
correctly.
Gator.
Yeah.
How does Gator get a clap?
No, because Rob said you've got to acknowledge the gator or he's going to come in here, take him away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as there you go, it's pretty snappy. As people listening or watching will have heard, there is also a live audience here with us. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, live people.
Hell yeah. So, how you doing, Ness? You doing all right today?
I'm all right. Yeah, a bit nervous about the convo today. It's a bit of a heavy one, brother.
Well, and especially every time we do this live, we get so used to just chatting. Other people in the room that do podcasting will feel the same. You just get in your little bubble and you chat to each other and you don't have a sense of like people listening. Whereas
No.
when we do the live shows, there's people here. It's really
I know.
weird.
I feel embarrassed. I feel a bit embarrassed. And we've just come from a lunch, which is really cool, with some friends that have friends of Filthy Hope that have driven all the way up from Bendigo in Victoria, hello our Victoria listeners, to meet with us and to join in this event this afternoon. And it was odd, like I loved them instantly, but the weirdest part is that they know more about us than we know about them, Jonty. So it felt a bit strange. And I remember in a conversation that I had with Julie earlier in the week, I said, I'm going to Orange. And she said, to visit your father. And I'm thinking, how the fuck do you know my father lives in Orange? And she said, because you mentioned it in the podcast. I'm going, oh my God, she knows about my vagina and everything.
People
She
actually
knows my
listen.
hemorrhoids and everything. It's like weird.
Yeah, if that's random, to go back and listen. It's
Yeah,
all
but it feels a bit strange, doesn't it?
Yeah. So today, like you said, we're going to be covering some potentially heavy subject matter. So I'm sure I've already warned listeners, but we are going to be talking about suicide today and mental illness. So again, please just look after yourself if you're listening, and this is a subject that is particularly troubling for you. Please look after yourself. There are resources down below in the show notes if you do need them. But yeah, we're going to be talking about suicide and mental illness, and we're going to be hearing some stuff from a special guest in a second as well that's going to help us in this conversation. But Ness, you've brought along some statistics, which I think people my age, I find are particularly wary and it's knowledgeable that this is a huge issue amongst young people. So maybe if to frame this conversation,
for sure,
just hit us with some stats.
So I found this, and we'll pop this in the show notes, at suicidepreventionaustralia.org. I was staggered to read that 3,144 people killed themselves in 2021, took their own life.
In Australia?
In Australia, yep. Over 10 million Australian adults know somebody who has died by suicide. I'm wondering if we're just a show of hands in the room with our live audience, do you know somebody that has taken their own life?
Just about every hand went up.
My wow, that's phenomenal. 1 in 2 young people are impacted by suicide by the time they turn 25. Can I have a show of hands? Is that true to... Yeah, wow, it's about half the room. Suicide was the 15th leading cause of death overall in Australia in 2021. And males are around 3 times more likely to die by suicide than a female. Indigenous Australians die by suicide at a rate twice higher than non-Indigenous people. LGBTIQ people have a higher rate of mental ill health and suicide than the general population in Australia due to experiences of discrimination and stigma. That's horrific.
Absolutely.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people have poorer mental health and higher rates of self-harm and suicide than the general population in Australia, due again to discrimination, historical dispossession, and a foreseeable removal of children, not foreseeable, forcible, and cultural suppression and exclusion.
And again, that we talked about that for listeners a handful of weeks ago now. In our episode with Nathan Tyson, that came up as well as a real, very big problem that is still a huge problem today that hasn't been addressed very well at all. And so with all of this stuff, and there's more, and some of the stats are really upsetting, I find. Part of what and why we thought today would be a really helpful and hopefully healing conversation is that largely we don't talk about this stuff.
No.
And we've just heard some stats. It's a huge issue, and for something that's that big, we barely talk about it.
I remember, Andy, chatting to my really good friends who are paramedics in New South Wales and leading paramedics over 2 different regions. They both work separately. And I remember having dinner with them and saying to Andy, brother, how was your week? You know, just catching up. I said, I've attended numerous suicides this week. And then hearing the details around that. And I went, oh my gosh, that's bizarre. So in Kellyville, you went to one in Kellyville. I never heard that on the news, Andy. How come I didn't hear that on the news? And he said it never makes the news. Most deliberately does not make the news. I was staggered. Several, not just one, but several. And it's traumatic for them to turn up to those events.
For sure.
Devastating. So it's a thing,
and
we don't talk about it much.
And this is something we'll, I guess the framework around which we're going to have this conversation is, and we come back to this a lot on this show, is the power and importance of storytelling and sharing our stories and sharing our experiences and hearing other people's stories and letting them resonate. So we are going to, in a sec, bring up our guest who is going to share in some storytelling with us. Friend of the show, been on a handful of times already, welcoming back to the show. I'm going to lean in and emphasise this, the Reverend Jon Humphries.
Whoa.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Humphries. Jon Humphries, welcome to the show.
Hello.
The Reverend Jon Humphries.
Live. Hi, people who are watching. Hi, people who are listening. I'm sorry, I'm here.
Great shirt, Reverend Brother.
Yes, if you can't see my shirt, I'm wearing a shirt by TradeMutt.com. It is visible mental health workwear. So I call it visible wellbeing because we're a visible wellbeing school where I work. The idea being, and my future maybe son-in-law James put me onto
no
it.
Pressure. No pressure, James.
There.
No pressure, but the clock's ticking, brother.
The idea being that this company makes these really loud shirts that you walk up and go, that's a really loud shirt, or that's a really cool shirt, or that's different. And on the back, Sorry, banging the table. On the back it says, this is a conversation starter. And the idea being that you then say, well, actually, the whole point of this shirt is to encourage people to talk about mental health and well-being, which we clearly know that doesn't, and it's workwear, so often on work sites, people don't do it. So then, when you see people wearing it, it should be a mental visual trigger to go, oh, how am I in myself?
So how are you, John?
I'm pretty good at the moment. Well,
Are you okay?
I am okay. And do you know what the second question you always ask is?
What's the second question?
Are you really okay?
Are
Because
you-
everyone
Oh,
says
it
yes.
says-
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Nah.
Or unless you're me and Jonty says, how are you, Ness? Sometimes I think he looks at me and says, please don't answer honestly.
Cut to 20 minutes later.
That's right.
Anyway, so there we go.
Yeah.
So are you okay today?
I am okay.
I mean, really okay, brother?
I am really okay. I like
excellent.
my life. Yeah.
That's awesome. And for regular listeners of the show, will have no doubt heard John's voice or seen John's face on the show before. But for potential new listeners who are here for the first time,
Yes.
you may introduce yourself, who you are, what you do for work, what's the connection?
I am a minister of the word in the Uniting Church, hence the reverend bit, but I don't like that. It's just John. Because I think everyone is ministers, are ministers. Some of us just get set aside to help resource everyone in their ministry. Currently, I work at Ravenswood School for Girls as the school chaplain. A few ex-Ravo girls here tonight. And on the 1st of October, I'm going into congregational ministry at Borkham Hills Uniting Church.
Yeah,
so
wow.
hopefully they still have me
Yes,
after I
yes,
say
yes,
everything
yes.
I say tonight. Yeah, it's really good. But it's good to be here.
Oh,
Good to
good
talk.
to have you back.
Important issue.
Very
And the big
important.
question
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
how do we talk about it?
Yeah,
Because we don't talk about it a lot. And we deliberately don't put it in the news because that might trigger other people. So it's not a big conspiracy not to mention it. It's because we know that there is a contagion effect that is with suicide. And so today we won't be mentioning any methods of suicide that we've either experienced or thought about ourselves or in the people that we've dealt with. So those who want the juicy goss, you're not going to get it because, again, that just plants thoughts. The focus always should be around mental health and well-being. So how are you? And if you're not okay, then clearly the question is, well, then how do we help you and what can we do? Jonty, is this a deliberate visual joke, gag on the table?
I set that up.
You set
I
that
didn't
up.
set
And the
books
Holy
up.
Spirit just inspired it.
Right,
Why?
okay.
What's your beef, brother?
There's this book called Infinite
Oh, yeah.
Jest
Didn't think of that. Yeah.
by David Foster Wallace, who
Great book.
sadly took his own life.
Oh,
So there's a bit of a joke, sad one at that. But he wrote some really good stuff, so I just thought that might have been a visual joke. But anyway.
Not intentional, but,
No.
but there you go.
There we
But there
go.
goes the,
Thanks
this
for
is
that,
a
John.
legend, and he wrote really great stuff around meaning. And this one, I don't know, I haven't read this, but some really good
very
stuff.
good.
And yet, this person who was very inspiring at the same time lost hope and felt the need to end his life prematurely.
And while you're on the books, one of the ones there standing up as well is a book by Johan Hari.
Yeah.
He has a book called Lost Connections, which I'd recommend to everybody. I'd recommend that book as well. But Lost Connections in particular is a research and data-driven study into causes and therefore strategies to combat depression, clinical depression. So I'd highly recommend that book as well.
Cool.
But I guess...
So maybe we could start off with modelling how you have a conversation around a difficult topic.
yeah, absolutely.
sure. I'd like to just jump into the story because I love a story.
Yeah. But like you asked me if I'm well,
Yeah.
and
And
I
you
should
said-
ask you, are you well
Yeah, I'm today.
today?
Yeah.
And what is wellness? And of course there's spiritual wellness, mental wellness, physical wellness, and all that sort of stuff. But today I think we're focusing on mental health and well-being as well.
100%.
So Ness, you said, yeah, you're okay.
Yeah.
Are you really okay?
Yeah, I'm okay, really okay today. But if you'd asked me this on Thursday, I wouldn't have answered I'm okay on Thursday. I really struggled. And I thought, do I really need to be back on my meds? And I had that conversation with my kids. should I be back on my meds? And even with Rob, and I'm just thinking, will I, won't I, will I, won't I? And so, no. And then it goes in a wave. And then the next day I go, oh, I'm okay today. Yeah. I'm all right. But interestingly, I've just reached out to a counsellor to actually have another tune-up. And I'm going to go back and see her and do some tune-up because I've got this 5 o'clock thing. You're wishing you hadn't asked now, aren't you, brother?
No.
Because I've got this bloody 5 o'clock thing that happens. And what happens is I work and go really hard. It's actually when I get home from work. I get home from work and I put my bags down and then I can get into an anxiety state, and it is anxiousness, and I'm not sure what's triggering the anxiousness. I think it's because I've got nothing to do. And when I've got nothing to do, my brain can just be a fuckwit and do whatever it wants to do. And it can go down all sorts of paths of dumbass thinking.
Yep.
And at the moment, I'm not enrolled in a subject at uni because we're going to go to Jerusalem, so I'm taking this semester off uni, right?
Am I going to Jerusalem?
No.
Wait, that's news to me.
I thought that was with Rob.
I am going with Rob. That's
because
right.
you mentioned to me, and I was like, this is new.
Oh, no. Do you want to come, brother?
I mean, if you're paying.
And I...
Awkward on the couch.
Oh, now I've forgotten where I was.
Anyway, it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And we go through ups and downs in life.
That's
and
right.
when we're in a dip,
you have
what
to reach
you've
out.
done,
So what I did was I reached out.
Or chat with people.
Or go back on your drugs.
Use your strategy.
Yeah,
if that's one of
exactly.
Your strategies.
That's right.
And so something that I picked up on there is that you are aware that you have your 5 p.m. slump.
I've got a thing that happens.
So I guess a follow-up question would be for me, when you notice that, what are the strategies that you have in place? Well, how do you when you know that might be coming?
Well, it can happen, and the worst part is it's right on family time, and I'll retreat, and I'll want to piss off up to my bedroom, which feels safe, and I've got strategies in and around feeling safe up there, but I'll often retreat from conversation, or I shut down, or I just do what I do. I don't know, it's not a great thing, but I know I'm doing it, and I kind of pretend that I'm not feeling it because I don't want anybody else to know that it's going on, but they all know that it's going on for me. And so then I think, how many times in a week does that go on, and do I need to go back on meds because I don't like the feeling? But sometimes I can ride it out, and by 8 o'clock it's past. So I'm curious to know, and we can talk about this in future pods, my gut sense is that one of my abuse memories happened in that time frame, happened in and around that time frame, because it's like it gets triggered with the light of the day.
Yeah.
It's a certain light in the day, and it's dusk is when it starts. I'm often driving home from work in dusk, or if I've landed home a little bit earlier, it can happen then.
Yep.
And so I'm thinking, I'm not going to bloody put up with that shit for another 20 years. I'm going to dive in and have a really good therapeutic look at that, and I'm going to work that out, and I'll come back to you and tell you what that's all about.
So if you weren't okay, what would you do?
Well,
or maybe
I go
you should
up
ask
to my
me that.
room. If I'll ask you that.
Yeah.
So I've just told you my strategies.
Yeah.
So tell me, when you're not okay, John.
Yes.
What do you do?
I'm lucky because I work at a school that's done a lot of work around positive psychology, which isn't about being positive, but it's about flourishing. And the guy who created it, Martin Seligman, head of Psychological Association of America, when we look at people who aren't well and try and help them not be unwell, but just not being unwell isn't enough. So he said, what if we looked at people who are flourishing and what they do, like we're talking about, then we can be more intentional about nurturing flourishing, which is at the positive end of psychology, hence positive psychology. And so they went to things like faith and spirituality, and they did some research around it, and it's a really good reminder of things that we can do, like focusing on positive emotions such as gratitude and awe and wonder, and getting into that love, and being engaged in things that stretch us but don't stress us. That's the E in his PERMA model, so positive emotions, engagement, positive relationships, so relationships that feed us and nurture us, doing something bigger than ourselves, which is M for meaning, that gives us meaning and purpose, and the accomplishment of big gritty goals where we might have to fail, but we learn resilience as we go along the way, and at the end we go, woo, I've really achieved something.
Yeah.
So that's really good. But there was a time in my life that I was not so good at that.
Are you up for sharing that story with us today?
That's why I'm here, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Plus I've had stories like you where we've dealt with people who have taken their lives and the ripples then that has for communities and particularly families, which are tragic.
Yeah.
So if you were talking with somebody, one of the big advice is to actually ask hard questions.
Yeah.
Like, are you
You're
saying okay or you're okay, but I'm not getting that vibe.
Yes.
Or you're not being yourself lately.
What's really going on?
What's going on for you? And which is good. It's open questions. It's just asking and caring and letting them talk. And if you get the vibe that they're not okay, even if they're saying it, it seems scary. And it's scary if we make it about us, but one of the things we're encouraged to do is ask hard questions, which is like, are you thinking of hurting yourself? And if they go, oh, no, not really, and you go, well, like, are you really? And do you have a plan? And have you worked out when you're going to do it? And then we've got the actual tools to actually step in and say, well, hey, brother. Or hey, sister, or hey, friend, we can, look, do I need to take that from you, or are there things that we can do? And then how do we connect you with people who can help you? Like Wellness HQ, it may seem like it's really hard, but we can get through this together.
Yeah.
And I may not have all the, I'm not a trained psychologist. I've done some training around suicide and mental health, but I'm not a psychologist, so I can't do therapy, but I can possibly carry people enough. And sometimes you may be the only person that they're happy to talk to. And not happy in the happy sense, obviously, but they feel trusting enough that they could actually share that. And so having that conversation is really important. And you may save their life and you may not. And that's another thing about suicide. It's not on you to save them. It's a superhero syndrome. It's not your role to save everyone, but we can help people and we give it a good crack. Yeah. And usually that works. So it's, often people worry, well, what if I say the wrong thing? And it's okay to say the wrong thing if you're caring.
Yep.
If you're trying to use a formula, then people are going to ring the disingenuous or this isn't authentic, and they're going to shut down and go away. If you're trying to do psychology on them or do care. But if you just care for them, always apologise and say, look, sorry, I don't know if that's the right question. I don't know what to say. It's okay to say you don't know what to say.
It's almost better to say I don't know what to say.
But let's work it out together. Let's ring Lifeline.
Yeah.
Let's ring the Suicide Prevention Hotline. Let's ring Beyond Blue, whatever it is. Or let's go, can I take you to a doctor?
Yep.
Do we need to go to the local emergency room? And you can do that. Yep. And, had to do that with someone in my family. And she's given me permission to share that, but we've had to actually ask that question. And that's really scary and a bit sad.
Yeah, it is sad. But it's hope on the brink, isn't it? Because we know her.
Yeah.
And we love her.
And it worked.
And it worked.
She ended up having her grippy sock holiday, as she called it.
And she's hilarious sharing about that holiday.
And that's work. So and then we get help. And it's okay to grieve about it too. But if we freak out and we make it about us, then we're not actually helping them because they're going to talk about scary stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
If we're not equipped, then it's okay, because the first rule of first aid, of course, and same with mental health first aid, is risk. Doctor, danger. Don't do something that's going to put you in a dangerous position. Come up with a strategy that works. So I'm not ready for this conversation, but we need to get you to somebody. So I'll take you to call an ambulance, get somebody in, call a priest, pastor, counsellor, Lifeline, whatever it is.
And the beautiful thing about your daughter sharing her story is that she has shared her story on the podcast,
Yep.
and it was such a great episode. And watching her share her level of vulnerability with mental health, and then to watch her today flourishing and being who she is. I mean, she opened our live event tonight for our listeners with a set of the most beautiful music. And to
Suicide playlist.
Yeah, she called it her suicide playlist, which I just love.
Not about taking suicide, but they had that theme in it.
Yeah, and it was
songs.
just beautiful. And to see her smashing life now and having had the intervention that she had with she calls it the grippy sock vacation, and to get all
because for those of you who don't know, you can't wear shoes in mental health wards because you might use the shoelaces for something that's not helpful. So they just give you these grippy socks. So work health and safety, you don't slip.
She
on
probably
the
uses them for
polished
Pilates
floors.
these days. Terrific.
She doesn't do exercise for those who listen. Anyway,
But it's a good story.
She was lucky, but there was a time in my life, if you were to ask me, where I didn't have that support. And I'd got to the point where I actually had a plan, and no one would have known. I thought anyway, probably people looked at me and go, he's not the same. But maybe a lot of people pretend.
How old were you,
really
John?
good. I was probably just left school, probably in that time after school.
Like 19?
Yeah.
Yep.
19, 20, something like that.
And what had led you to have no hope? What were the circumstances that were leading to these feelings?
I think it was, I would surprise everyone, I've always been a little bit different. And my family loved me, but I didn't think people did. My favourite song was from The Smiths. It's my theme song. I know I'm unlovable. You don't need to tell me. I don't have much in my life. But take it, it's yours. So that was like my theme song. And I just thought it'd be great for everyone if I just wasn't here. I'd just save everyone a whole bunch of trouble.
Despite having a loving mother and father and family.
And they wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
But you can go down the rabbit hole of thinking, unhelpful thinking patterns. I had issues with friends growing up that I didn't fit in, and I'd gone through an experience of church where I didn't fit in, and I literally sat deliberately on one side of the church away from everyone to see if anyone would do or say anything, and I went, well, no, that just confirms it. No one cares. And that's not a judgment on them, but in my head, that was a test, and we often play these mental games. They probably went, well, John's pushed himself away, let's give him his space. They were probably being just as thinking they were caring. But those sorts of change in behaviour or things like that, there should be our triggers. If somebody is really happy and then they start pulling away and disassociating and spending hours in their bedroom when they don't normally do that.
Yep.
Or the opposite. Sometimes people who are really depressed, all of a sudden they seem well.
Yep.
That's often a sign, it can be a sign that they've made
the decision
and a resolution. They have a plan and they're now at peace because they're going to put it right
into action.
And so it's not that we have to be worried and stressed, because if we make this about drama, it's not helpful to the person. The last thing you want when you're feeling bad about yourself or you've lost hope in life is somebody coming in and going, oh my God, you're going to kill yourself. That's the worst thing in the world. You just will filter that through your negativity and just see it's all your fault anyway. And that's another reason to do it. It's probably time to hurry up and make things better for everyone if you're not there. So, I had a plan. I didn't actually ever put the plan into action. I didn't have a when. But there was, I knew how I was going to do it. And it was just a matter of then getting up the courage to do it, I guess.
In previous conversations that you and I have had just as friends,
Yep.
you've talked about darkness, real darkness that you've felt. Was that linked with this time?
I don't know if it's darkness. I like darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Darkness has always been my friend. When I was a little kid, I used to cover myself in my doona, and I liked the dark. And then I went, when I was old enough, to go down caving, and you can't get darker than caves. So darkness isn't a metaphor I use, but I was probably clinically depressed,
Right.
but never diagnosed
Yeah.
because I was just sad.
Yeah.
And there was no meaning in my life, and I didn't feel lovable. It wasn't that I wasn't loved, but I didn't feel worthy of love, and I didn't feel that I was lovable.
Did that
anyone
come
could
from
love.
anything specific that you can put a...
No.
No?
Well, I think it's just, again, friends that invite other friends over. I never fit in any particular group. Probably not the dumbest person in the world, but I like to think differently, and so that sense of being different. There's probably a girl involved, I think, at one stage where I just felt rejection, and that probably added to the unlovableness. Yeah. But for me, it was just.
And John, did you at that time did you seek help? Did anybody in the family recognise that there was a problem and get you into counselling or medication or none of that?
I had my plan.
Yep.
I was going to do it, and then bloody God got in the way.
And what happened? Why did you not do it?
God.
What was he up to?
Or she.
What?
They.
Don't start me on the pronouns. I got into trouble about the pronouns just recently. I'm struggling with that. I so want to understand.
Look, I was certain that I was unloved, and, one of my jobs at home was to do the lawns. And strangely, throughout my life, whenever I have done lawn mowing, it's been a deep and thinking time. Probably because you've got nothing else to do than push this mower back and forward. But I really remember there was this time when Bible verse just kept popping into my head. This one verse which Jesus said, "I'm the good shepherd and my sheep know my voice, and no one can snatch them from my hand."
Wow.
And I went, something clicked in me and go, I can't even snatch myself from God's hand. And that was enough of a trigger to change things. And then I worked out I was being stupid. And that's not judgment on people.
No.
Because stupid for me is when you know the right thing and you do the wrong thing. It's not about a lack of intelligence. I'm not saying suicidal people are stupid. But for me, it was stupid thinking in that clearly I was loved.
Yeah.
I had people, and I was acting in a way that was pushing them away and then proving my own point that I was loved. It was me. I was the problem, and I just needed to fix myself.
Interesting.
So I
happened
needed
mowing.
healing, and I needed to do something, and that was enough to change my mindset enough, which won't work for everyone, but my other favourite passage that I guess is linked to that, when Jesus came to the guy who couldn't walk, who was sitting by a pool, and said, "Do you want to be well?"
Yep.
And I had to want to be well.
Yep.
And I had to realise that I wasn't well, and for me, that was a trigger. Everyone else's story is different, but for me, God seemed to get in my head and give me a little tap on the head and prompt to say, actually, you're thinking the wrong way.
And what happened after that for you?
I got better.
Just
literally pretty much better.
But what
It
practically...
didn't mean that I was never unhappy again, because there was a time when I did find Linda and she almost dropped me because I had this thing I called the mystery miseries, where I just felt sad all the time. Again, we'd probably call it depression. But again, there's something, and I don't know what brought me out of that one.
You didn't medicate?
But no, because this is back in the 90s. We weren't as aware.
Did you talk about it as depression? Did you name it?
No, I talked about to Linda that I had mystery miseries, and
You literally named it mystery miseries.
I did.
But not depression. It was
And
still...
she was good enough to stick with me and not drop me, which she said she was almost going to do at one stage. which was a fair call because I was just sad.
Have you since that? So, do you think you're prone to ebbs and flows of depressive nature?
No, not anymore. But suicides are different. If you'd asked me, am I thinking about killing myself?
Yep.
Which is one of the questions we should have the courage to ask.
Yep.
And I would say yes and no.
Yeah, I asked you this week.
Yeah, this
in
week.
the car, and I was horrified. I nearly had to pull over.
Can you unpack the yes and no?
Yeah. So I spent so much time thinking about it that I think I haven't done the research into it, but I think I neurologically hardwired that thought into my brain. And even if it's not a neuroplasticity thing, once you've thought something, you can't unthink it. So there have been many times in my life where things are not right. If my relationship with Linda wasn't right, I would think about killing myself. And I'd come up with creative ways to do it. Never really intending to, because I always had the break, which was don't be stupid. And again, not judging people who are suicidal and saying they're stupid. It's just me waking up to myself going, that's not helpful thinking. I know better and I should do what's good and right rather than that. But you can't help thinking it once you've thought it once and once you've trained your brain to think it. But it's actually since I've been to Ravenswood and learned about positive psychology, I'm less prone to diving into that thought pattern. But, you know, if you've watched a murder mystery thing, you may have thought, you know, I could probably pull off and get away with it better than that.
Hang on, killing somebody, not yourself.
Yeah, but that creative thought, you know, I could get away with a crime or I could do that.
I could rob a bank or...
Yeah, I could rob a bank or those sorts of thoughts. That's the same with, you know, suicide, killing myself. And so now it's more an intellectual exercise, you know. So if you said, do I have a plan? You know, I've probably thought of a few along the way and go, oh, you know, I could do that, or I could do that. And then I have to just catch myself and go, you know, that's just the legacy. It's like, you know, you can't leave the past behind. You can let it go, but it's still part of your story. And so those thoughts, less and less these days, come into my brain. So have I thought about it? Yes. Am I going to? No. Am I likely to? No. But I can't sometimes help thinking about it because that's what I think I trained my brain to do way back then. It's a bit like an alcoholic who would say, you know, when they're on the AA path, they're always a recovering alcoholic.
Yep.
They're never going to not be an alcoholic. I'm never going to not be a suicidalist because I've opened that door. I've stood on that edge, you know, we call it on the brink.
Yep.
And thought about jumping off. And because I've thought about that, that's a thought that I can't unthink. So it's just there. And it comes back and it haunts me and I just have to process it. Like we do with all of our issues in our lives. So when we learn to process our grief, the grief doesn't go away. We just get better at managing it. And those waves, we get, like in a wave in the ocean, you know. Are you going to dive through it? Are you going to ride it? Are you going to surf it? But if you're not prepared and you don't do something, it's going to knock you for six. So as long as you've got a strategy and some peeps around you and a support network. And if you're doing stuff, I don't know, mindfulness has been a great tool for me because now I can actually choose what I focus on because mindfulness isn't meditation for relaxation. It's actually meditation to choose your focus and being aware and then refocusing to what you want to focus on rather than what just naturally goes on in your head. So,
but you know, sometimes when you're so far down the rabbit hole of the anxiety or the whatever the thinking spiral that you're on, sometimes the Calm app, I'm sorry, just doesn't cut the mustard.
The voice doesn't.
No, mate, nothing. And then I was reading this shit the other day.
And
this came up. No, listen to this. TikTok. If you're feeling anxious, take your pen, wait, this is the funniest shit ever, and focus on the words, then take your vision externally, then pull back and external and pull back, and you won't feel anxious anymore. Oh, fuck off.
BS, yeah.
Are you
and
kidding?
that's the thing.
Just take the diazepam, bitch, and
Mindfulness
go to sleep.
is a tool.
I mean, what is that
Yeah.
crap?
It's not magic. None of this is magic. Wellness
Sorry.
isn't magic.
It's not a thing?
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
But that might work.
It might work for some.
For
Now I
some,
feel
like-
bad for having said that.
Well, and that's again, it's like people who colour in and say I'm doing mindfulness. That's just colouring.
Yeah.
If you're not actually practicing focus and being aware of what's going on in your heart and your soul and your mind, and then saying, no, I'm going to choose to just let that go, and I'm going to bring my focus back to the practice of colouring and intention.
I'm going to ring you next time I'm in that moment.
That is the mindfulness practice. Just colouring is just colouring. That's why you can do mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful all the time, because it's about focus and awareness and focus and awareness and focus, not about the thing, which may help some people, but if you don't understand the thinking, then you don't practice
Then
it.
you're just looking at a pen.
Then you're looking at a pen. That's right.
Yeah.
And if it's not a tool in your toolkit,
No.
then even if you think I've just got this tool that somebody's handed me, if you don't know how to use it, like somebody gives you,
I just want
a
to
circular
apologise.
saw, it's like, cool. It's not, I don't know how to use it. It's a tool, but I don't know how to
apologise,
use it.
John, because there might be people out there that find the pen thing a thing. And I just want to say sorry. If that's a thing for you and I've just ridiculed it, I'm really sorry, because I'm a bit jealous that the pen works for you and it doesn't work for me, quite frankly. Because I had times when I was in the depths of my dealing with my abuse that all I wanted to do was I used to say I wanted to be on a drip.
Yeah.
Could somebody just put me on a drip?
Comfortably numb.
Yeah, I
There's a
just
song
wanted to
about
be
it.
knocked out. Can you just put me to sleep right now? I didn't want to die forever, but I just didn't want to be alive for about probably a month.
Yeah.
Could they just put me on ice for a month?
And that intensity of feeling is exhausting,
It's
and it adds
exhausting.
to the thing.
Yeah.
And little, that's where, positive psychology isn't the answer. Martin Seligman said this doesn't replace traditional psychology. When you're not well, there are certain things that you need and therapies that are going to help you. It's just like...
Or medicine. I should have been on medicine, quite frankly.
if you've had any particular physical activity, if you tear a calf muscle, doing some stretches without training from the physio is going to be a waste of time. So
I had a horrific moment once, and I've had a few horrific moments, but this particular horrific moment, I don't know if I've shared on the pod, but I'd had this, what I've identified now as extreme abandonment. So I was triggered in the ultimate abandonment scenario, and something snapped in my head, and I got in my car and I
you're not going to talk about the actual way that you
No,
planned.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
I got in my car and
Just so we know, we're practicing what we preach here.
Yeah,
So we're
but I
not just
didn't
being
want to
rude.
live anymore, and I wanted to be on that drip.
Yeah.
But I was not going to take a drip. I needed to just not be alive anymore. I couldn't deal with what was going on in my brain. It was instant dark. And
how old were you? Just
I
to paint
was
the-
24.
Okay.
Yep. And so I tried to get across a few lanes of traffic, and I just now know that it was a God intervention. And then I tried another thing to park to then go and get something that I needed to help me, assist me, and I couldn't get a park on Beecroft Road, so I kept going, and then I got to the house where I needed to be, and I rang my friend and said, I don't want to be alive anymore. Can you please help me? I need to not be alive anymore. And she rushed home from work and she gave me 2 Macindols. And I didn't know what that was back in the day, but it was like she used to take it for badass period pain. Any of you done Macindol? It's like, and it puts you to sleep. So I slept for some period of, it was the best go to sleep shit ever. And I went to sleep all that afternoon and all that night till the next morning. And And then in the morning I woke up and the feeling had subsided. Yeah. So I wonder about suicide, right? So I didn't take my life. My friend intervened. It was magnificent. I believe God was in it all. I became a Christian soon after that event. But I wonder if people that take their life, I wonder if they didn't take their life and somebody intervened, if they'd wake up like I did the next day and go, I'm glad that didn't happen.
And they would. And that's the sad thing.
Yeah.
But like in everything in life, you can't choose for other people. God can't even choose for us. So us making it about us and being guilty that we didn't do something is not ultimately helpful. It will just lead us into sadness and depression.
Yeah.
If we keep playing those sorts of stuff. Yeah. It's okay to be sad that we lost them, and what if we'd done something better? Maybe it would have helped, but maybe it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because some people, if they've got it in their mind, they're going to do it. And other people don't have it in their mind, and then they take some alcohol and it's a stupid idea. That's why guys are more likely to do it, because they make a spur of the moment, often alcohol affected, and they choose a more lethally irreversible means.
Final ending, yeah.
So, I was on a camp with Linda, and we had a girl try and overdose on some whatever she could get her things on, and we ended up taking her to a hospital, and she had to drink this horrible charcoal drink.
Yes.
And I think if you've ever had to do that, you don't ever want to drink the charcoal. It's not pleasant, but we got her safe. But if she'd chosen another means that was available at the camp, we couldn't have brought her back, because that would have been it.
Yep.
It just so happened. And I think that's part of the statistics. So I understand from the reading that I've done, it's not that women don't think about it more, is they often choose more reversible means.
Are you glad you didn't die?
Yeah. And I think that's the message. You woke up and you felt okay.
Yeah.
And the message that we can give to people who are that deep in the sadness or hopelessness or whatever is going on for them is that this will pass. Yeah. And it's not easy. It's never fun to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, either for yourself or with somebody. But that's the story of faith, that we go through the way of the cross. It's not about Jesus died on the cross and just saved us, as much as that's part of it. It actually is the way that Jesus called us to live. Take up your cross. And it's not, I've got a bad back and I've just got to put up with it. It's actually bearing other people's loads, as Paul talked about it, and carrying them with them for enough that gets them through. And the good thing is when somebody's there, we'll get through this. We'll get through this. It's going to be hard. I'm not going to promise any miracles. I've got in my office 3 plastic wands now.
Wands?
I think. Yeah, wands. And I'd say
like abracadabras.
If I could wave this wand and make it all better for you, I would. But it's plastic and it's not going to work. So we're going to have to find something better that will help it. And it's not going to be easy. And it might be therapy. It might be change. I think God does get in the way. You've got your story, I've got my story. But not, you can't leave it to God.
No.
So the thing is, it's not to burden ourselves with guilt when somebody does something. We grieve for them and we grieve that we weren't able to help, but that's not our burden. They made their choices. But we have the power to make choices now that can help people. And if we get that vibe, to have that courage to just say, look,
I think
where are we at?
A big takeaway for me is being able to have that conversation earlier and along the way, not at the brink, not at that, at the friend's house the night of. Like being able to get better at having those conversations earlier and just make it normal like we were doing before. Are you really okay?
And what Martin Seligman and hopefully the church can learn from it is that we've got the tools there.
Yep.
We don't often give people the tools because they just come on a Sunday morning and we put them through the service and they worship and then they walk out. But we don't give them good community necessarily, other than a cup of tea and you talk about something. how do we create space for authentic relationships where we actually care for each other, where we have the courage to ask, are you well? And then the next courage, do you want to be well?
Yep.
And some people will say, no, I don't want to be well.
Yep.
And you go, but, well, I'm going to walk with you and we're going to lead you because there's hope. And then that's the main thing, that we need to practice stuff that keeps us flourishing, because then we're less likely to slip into unwellness. And when we do, hopefully we don't go as deep and we don't stay as long. And if we can create communities that foster flourishing, then we can maybe stop some of this. And then if we've then got the tools in our toolkit to help when things go wrong, and the network around us to help us, and people should have 5. We say this with kids. This was from a psychiatrist at Hornsby Hospital who came and talked to us around suicide and mental health, because we're now seeing little peeps now, littler than ever, with mental health issues. He said everyone should have 5. And they're the 5 people you could go to other than your parents or maybe your spouse. Maybe we can do it with the spouse, but sometimes we're not, that's not a thing. That you can go and have a conversation and say that you're not okay.
Yep.
And that they're going to be the ones who will, that you say to them, I want you to be my 5 who check in with me every now and then. And in the past we had godparents, and then we sort of dumbed down godparents to just be the person who was there at the baptism. But wouldn't that be an awesome role for a godparent to have,
100%.
to take on the spiritual growth, which they promised to do, but also the wellness, and just walk and have relationships. And in a church that is rich with lovely people with lots of wisdom that, into their senior years, just walk alongside. We've got the whole Growing Young book that says young people just want to be known and loved. And if they're known and loved, then that's church. And they don't care what songs they sing as much as that, Nancy knows me and Arthur keeps asking me about what's going on in my life, and Mrs. What's-Her-Face takes me out for coffee every now and then. And I love them and they love us, and I help them and they help me. And isn't that community?
I want to go in another tangent and
Sure.
want to ask something quite provocative
Yeah,
now,
sure.
okay? While we're talking about church and the gathered community, what about there's some Christian faiths, and for the live people here, this is a good one because I'm keen to know what you think or if you have an opinion. So the thought that some Christian faiths believe that if you take your own life, you go to hell. What do we think about that?
We also think gay people go to hell.
Yeah.
I was taught that at high school.
Yeah.
You were told at
For
high school.
listeners, someone in the audience was taught that at high school.
It's like the question about, does the devil make people kill themselves? I think for me the story of Jesus and the guy that he put spitting mud on his eyes, what we sometimes miss in that is the disciples ask, whose fault is it that he was born blind? And Jesus says, you're asking the wrong question. This person just needs to be helped. Who cares? We're going to make something good of this. This person's blindness will be used for the glory of God today because I'm going to help him. And you're not helping them, and the community's not helping them. And even when he did get help, then the community went, well, that happened on a Saturday.
That's right.
The Sabbath. And the religious people went, that's just against the rule. You can't love people and heal them on the Saturday because it says it in the Bible that you can't be nice or do work of healing.
Do the 6 days a week, mate.
Yeah.
Pastoral
6 days
care,
a week
6 days
you can get blind.
Yeah, that's right.
Healed. You can get healing of the blind, but not on the Sabbath day.
No.
And Jesus went, what a load of crock. And you're asking the wrong questions. So I'm in the line for hell as much as anyone else.
Say that again.
I'm standing in the line for hell as much as anyone else because I don't live well, and it says in the Bible, if
But
you
I
don't
think-
live love, then you don't know God and God doesn't know you. And Jesus in the parable of the sheep and the goat said, I don't know you. Off to the weeping and gnashing of teeth place. But then we've got grace. So I don't think we need to worry about that. And And judging who gets to heaven and who's is just not helpful. And
when you're in the midst of deep, complex trauma, I'm just here to tell you, testify to that, it's fucking living hell.
Yeah.
If there's a hell, that's hell.
Yeah.
It
And
is not
you don't
great.
need any more guilt, making you feel even worse.
Yeah,
that's right.
It
Yeah.
just gives you another reason to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to die anyway, I'm going to hell anyway, and well, now I'm going to hell whether I go to hell or not go to hell, so, you know, I feel even more guilty. So how do we just change our even thinking and theology to go, well, it's about how do we love people?
I can't
And how
wait
do
to
we
get to
care
heaven
about
and see Judas and have champs with him. We're
Yeah,
gonna do,
because there is the story of Jesus hanging himself.
yeah, I'm going to be there with him, and we're going to do champs, and I reckon we're going to do blue cheese on lovely crackers, gluten-free crackers, and I'm going to say, tell me your story, brother.
And he may not want to talk to us, and that's the sad thing.
No,
For
he'll
me,
be in heaven, John. He will.
yeah, but I think for me, hell is heaven and not being able to access that. I think I've said that on a podcast. That to be in that love, just like I was in a loving family. I had friends, people who cared for me, and I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And I put myself through hell.
Yes.
So maybe we get to heaven and Judas is there still feeling guilty that he killed himself.
Yeah.
Because he betrayed Jesus. And Jesus is going, dude,
It's okay, brother.
well, I asked you to do it.
Yeah, that's right. Just like, come on.
Literally said that. Look, it's okay.
Yeah.
It just needed to happen. It was what it was, and you're forgiven and you're loved.
Yeah.
And the worst thing would be not to be able to take that offer and say,
Forgiven
I'm still
and
unlovable.
loved. And I think that's the core message, isn't it?
Yeah.
Forgiven and loved for the thoughts,
Yep.
for the actions,
Yep.
forgiven and
So
loved.
we're not to judge
No.
ourselves, we're not to judge
Anybody
others.
else.
All of that just makes hell for everyone. Let's just get on with being caring and
And if you need the grippy socks, take the meds.
exactly.
Don't you
That's one of
reckon?
the tools.
Cheers to that, I
Jesus
say.
made the poor guy who was blind
Yeah.
Get spit and mud in his
get
face.
spitting mud in your face and then go and wash it off. Like if you couldn't see beforehand, now you can't see because you've got spitting mud on your eyes. How the hell am I going to find the pool of Siloam? I'm blind.
That's right.
And there is no one here to help me.
Yeah.
And but he did. He found his way through, and that's for me the encouraging thing. That
That's hope on the
sometimes we
brink.
need to participate in our own healing, and maybe we need to do that. We have to want to be well. We have to decide. And when I wanted to be well, for me, that was enough. But other people might need therapy.
And
other
somebody-
people might need ongoing support because some of it's to do with brain chemistry. Our
Yeah.
brains literally screw with us. They're just not happy brains. We've gained more and more research that some of that. But we do know that, some of this other stuff, like good relationships.
Having your
and
five,
things
I
like
love that.
Yeah.
Having your five.
Do actually affect our brain chemistry.
100%.
And going exercise and getting sunlight and all the stuff that we should do if we're feeling down that we don't want to do, but if we can get out of the bed and take our meds or do our exercise, get in the sun,
Yep.
connect with people, serve other people. One of the greatest things you can do is just, well, I'm having a bad day, but at least I can help somebody else. And that makes me feel a bit better. And maybe you feel a bit better and 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 a bit better until you're well.
Amen.
Talk about filthy hope.
Well, that's it. God
Thank
is
you,
there.
John
It's
Humphries.
a long, muddy, dirty-eyed process
That's right.
sometimes.
Bloody dirty-eyed process. I love that. Yeah, that's right. For the listeners and watchers at home, we're going to wrap up here. For everyone here in the room, we're going to have a Q&A. We're going to continue this conversation. But for everyone watching and listening at home, thank you for listening. Please feel free to get in touch. You can email us at filthyhopepod@gmail.com or find us on socials.
And if you're not feeling well, people, we're really sorry. And we love you, and get some help. Talk
That's
to
right.
somebody. Find your five. And you can get through it. That's the message. We can usually
Absolutely.
get through it if we get the right help. It's not hopeless.
Yes.
Even if it feels that way.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great message to end on, I think. So thank you for listening
Thanks for having
watching.
me.
Thanks, John, for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.
This is a prayer for the people. See your face in anything. Find peace in letting go of the guilt that isn't yours, and find hope in understanding. Life is not a game you have to win. Forgiveness overwhelming, salvation undeserving. You are loved by something beyond, someone beyond understanding.